Welcome back to your English literature class. In the previous session, we discussed the themes of escapism and language, narrative methodology, and setting, along with the reading of pages 116 and 117. Today, we'll continue the same. By the end of this video, you will be able to understand the meanings of difficult words as used in the context, express the story in your own words, and quote lines from the text to substantiate your answers. Till now, you have read that one day a strange man appeared in the narrator's house to watch the bees. He was smartly dressed, clearly unlike the beggars who came to his house every day. The narrator talked to him in a friendly manner. During the course of the conversation, the stranger told the narrator that he took interest in poetry. He also told the narrator that his name was B. Wordsworth, with B standing for black. He said he was the brother of the celebrated English poet William Wordsworth, with equal interest in poetry. The small beauties of nature, like the morning glory flower, brought the same intense passion in him as it did for Wordsworth, the poet. The flower overwhelmed him so much that he began crying. The narrator appeared a bit taken aback. He was unable to grasp the depth of his words. He wondered as to why a man would cry, looking at the trivial things of nature. So, let's continue reading. Open your Echo's textbook at page number 118. Let's read. Why, boy, why? You know when you grow up. You are a poet too, you know. And when you are a poet, you can cry for everything. Children, as I have already told you, the narrator was unable to grasp the depth of the words of B. Wordsworth. He wondered as to why a man would cry looking at the trivial things of nature. To this, B. Wordsworth answered that the boy would come to know when he grew up. He told him that he saw a poet in him too, and he would also cry when he would be moved by something. I couldn't laugh. He said, You like your mother? When she not beating me. He pulled out a printed sheet from his hip pocket and said, On this paper is the greatest poem about mothers, and I am going to sell it to you at a bargain price, for 4 cents. I went inside and I said, Ma, you want to buy a poetry for 4 cents? My mother said, Tell that blasted man to haul his tail away from my yard. You hear? Hip pocket means a pocket at the back of a pair of trousers. Cents. A cent is a very small unit of money. Blasted man is an adjective used to express annoyance. Haul means pull. B. Wordsworth asked the narrator whether he liked his mother, to which he innocently replied that he liked her when she did not beat him. Then he proceeded to coax him to buy his poem. He told him that it was the greatest poem ever written on the mother. He wanted just 4 cents for it. The narrator ran to his mother for money, but he was rudely turned away. The lady wanted the stranger to be thrown out of the house at once. I said to B. Wordsworth, My mother say she ain't have 4 cents. B. Wordsworth said, It is the poet's tragedy. So the narrator informed B. Wordsworth that his mother didn't have 4 cents, to which Wordsworth smiled wryly. He murmured that it was poet's tragedy. The poets hardly succeed to make money. People are unwilling to buy poetry at even 4 cents. Children, Here, the author, through this incident, highlights the sad condition of the poets who have no respect in the society. They fail to earn money and live life on reasonable terms. People often reject their works without any consideration of efforts behind them. And he put the paper back in his pocket. He didn't seem to mind. These lines indicate that B. Wordsworth was used to such rejection. This happened with him very often. I said, "Is a funny way to go round selling poetry like that. Only Calypsonians do that sort of thing. A lot of people does buy." He said, "No one has yet bought a single copy." Calypsonian, originally known as Chantwell, is a musician from the Anglophone Caribbean who sings songs called calypso. Children, Anglophone means English speaking. The narrator found it quite amusing that he would move about selling his poems like this, and he asked B. Wordsworth whether a lot of people bought his poems, to which B. Wordsworth replied that he hadn't sold a single poem of his. "But why you does keep on going round then?" He said, "In this way I watch many things, and I always hope to meet poets." So, in answer to the narrator's question, why he kept on going round then, B. Wordsworth answered that no one bought his poetry, but he kept wandering to meet other poets and observe things to write more poetry. I said, "You really think I is a poet?" "You are as good as me," he said. So, children, here B. Wordsworth encouraged the narrator by saying that he had the makings of a poet. And when B. Wordsworth left, I prayed I would see him again. So when B. Wordsworth left, the narrator prayed that he would see B. Wordsworth again because he seemed to like him. About a week later, coming back from school, one afternoon, I met him at the corner of Mill Street. He said, "I have been waiting for you for a long time." I said, "You sell any poetry yet?" He shook his head. So the narrator's wish to meet B. Wordsworth was fulfilled a week later. He met him at the corner of his street. Which street, children? Mill Street. B. Wordsworth told narrator that he had been waiting for him for a long time. It seems Wordsworth had been hanging around in that corner for quite some long time, waiting for his young friend. So the two started chatting. The narrator asked B. Wordsworth whether he had sold any poem, to which B. Wordsworth shook his head. That means he hadn't sold any poetry yet. He said, "In my yard, I have the best mango tree in the port of Spain." Port of Spain, children, is the capital and the chief port of Trinidad and Tobago. And now the mangoes are ripe and red and very sweet and juicy. I have waited here for you to tell you this and to invite you to come and eat some of my mangoes. So B. Wordsworth invited the narrator to come to his house and eat mangoes grown ripe and juicy in his yard. He lived in Alberto Street in a one-roomed hut placed right in the center of the lot. Lot means a portion of land. The yard seemed all green. There was a big mango tree. There was a coconut tree and there was a plum tree. The place looked wild, as though it wasn't in city at all. Wild means in natural state. You couldn't see all the big concrete houses in the street. Concrete houses means houses made of cement. So the narrator found the idea of going to B. Wordsworth's house quite appealing. Instead of coming home, he accompanied Wordsworth to his tiny one-room hut. The narrator found his one-room hut very charming. In its big green yard were a mango tree and a plum tree and a coconut tree. The place looked wild, as if it wasn't in the city at all, because they couldn't see any of the cemented houses around. He was right. The mangoes were sweet and juicy. I ate about 6, and the yellow mango juice ran down my arms to my elbows and down my mouth to my chin, and my shirt was stained. Stained means dirty. So, children, the narrator ate about 6 ripe mangoes. They were juicy and they were tasty. The juice dripped down and covered his hand, mouth, and soiled his shirt. It made his shirt dirty. My mother said when I got home, "Where you was? You think you is a man now and could go all over the place? Go cut a whip for me." Whip is a long thin piece of material such as leather or rope fastened to a stiff handle. It is used for hitting people or animals. She beat me rather badly, and I ran out of the house swearing that I would never come back. I went to B. Wordsworth's house. I was so angry. My nose was bleeding. So, children, when the narrator reached home, he was scolded and beaten by his mother. She caned him so badly that he rushed out of his house in rage and pain, swearing never to return. With blood oozing out of his nose, he rushed to B. Wordsworth's place for some respite. B. Wordsworth said, "Stop crying, and we'll go for a walk." I stopped crying, but I was breathing short. We went for a walk. We walked down St. Clair Avenue to the savannah, and we walked to the race course. Breathing short means finding it difficult to breathe. The savannah. Children, Queen's Park Savannah is a park in Port of Spain. Known locally as simply the savannah, it is Port of Spain's largest open space. So, children, B. Wordsworth comforted the narrator and suggested that they should go for a walk. Thus, there began a friendship between the narrator and B. Wordsworth, which proved to be very educative for the narrator. They walked aimlessly. They went to St. Clair Avenue, then to the savannah, and finally to racecourse. B. Wordsworth said, "Now let us lie on the grass and look up at the sky, and I want you to think how far those stars are from us." I did as he told me, and I saw what he meant. I felt like nothing, and at the same time I had never felt so big and great in all my life. I forgot all my anger and all my tears and all my blows. So, children, B. Wordsworth proposed that they could lie on the grass and stare at the sky and ponder how far were the stars. This brief tryst with the distant sky above acted like a balm for the narrator's scars. He felt light and refreshed. The anger melted away. He was feeling calm. He had forgotten all his tears and all the blows given to him by his mother. When I said I was better, he began telling me the names of the stars, and I particularly remembered the constellation of Orion the Hunter, though I don't really know why. I can spot Orion even today, but I have forgotten the rest. So, when the narrator told that he was feeling better, B. Wordsworth began telling him about the stars and the constellations. Children, constellation is a group of stars that appears to form a pattern or a picture. So he told him about Orion the Hunter. In this picture, you can see Orion the Hunter. So the narrator said that he could not forget the constellation of Orion the Hunter, and he remembered it for life. Children, here we can say that the narrator also learnt poetic sensibilities from B. Wordsworth. Then a light was flashed in our faces, and we saw a policeman. We got up from the grass. Flash means shine in a bright but brief sudden way. The policeman said, "What are you doing here?" B. Wordsworth said, "I have been asking myself the same question for 40 years. Now, children, a policeman came there and he asked the two of them what they were doing there. B. Wordsworth's answer, "I have been asking myself the same question for over 40 years," gives us a hint about B. Wordsworth's identity. He wondered about his own identity. The policeman just walked away, finding nothing sinister or nothing wrong going on over there. We became friends, B. Wordsworth and I. He told me, "You must never tell anybody about me, and about the mango tree, and the coconut tree, and the plum tree. You must keep that a secret. If you tell anybody, I'll know, because I'm a poet." So, B. Wordsworth implored the narrator to keep their friendship a secret. The mango tree, the plum tree, and all the things should be kept a secret. And he claimed that he could find out if the narrator told anything to anyone, as he was a poet. The narrator, "I gave him my word and I kept him." The narrator promised him that he would never tell anybody about their friendship, and he never broke his promise. I liked his little room. It had no more furniture than George's front room, but it looked cleaner and healthier, but it also looked lonely. So in these lines, the narrator describes the room of B. Wordsworth, which did have a lot of furniture, but it was quite clean and it looked very healthy, but it was lonely. One day I asked him, "Mr. Wordsworth, why you does keep all this bush in your yard? Ain't it does make the place damp?" Damp means moist. On one occasion, the narrator asked B. Wordsworth why the bushes had grown so wildly and hadn't been pruned. So B. Wordsworth began to unravel a story. He said, "Listen, and I will tell you a story. Once upon a time, a boy and girl met each other, and they fell in love. They loved each other so much, they got married. They were both poets. He loved words, she loved grass and flowers and trees. They lived happily in a single room. And then one day, the girl poet said to the boy poet, "We are going to have another poet in the family." But this poet was never born, because the girl died, and the young poet died with her inside her. And the girl's husband was very sad, and he said he would never touch a thing in the girl's garden. And so the garden remained and grew high and wild. So B. Wordsworth narrated a story about a girl and a boy who were in love, and their love culminated into a happy marriage. While the boy poet loved words, the girl poet loved to watch the flowers and the trees in the garden. They lived in a one-room house, but were contented with the life they were living. Soon the girl poet announced the arrival of their baby in their house, but unfortunately, they could never celebrate the arrival of the baby, because the baby died in her womb. The girl too died, leaving the boy poet sad and fuming over his life and destiny. He was heartbroken. He never touched anything in the girl's garden. Thus, the grasses had become tall and unwieldy. I looked at B. Wordsworth, and as he told me this lovely story, he seemed to grow older. I understood his story. As Wordsworth narrated the story, he seemed to grow old quite fast. Actually, B. Wordsworth had narrated the story of his own life in a nutshell, and the narrator seemed to realize this. We went for long walks together. We went to the botanical gardens and the rock gardens. We climbed Chancellor Hill in the late afternoon and watched the darkness fall on Port of Spain, and watched the lights go on in the city and on the ships in the harbour. So from then on, the two got very close. They went for long walks to Botanical Garden, Rock Garden, Chancellor Hill and other places. They saw Port of Spain sink into dusk's darkness as lights lighted up everywhere. He did everything as though he were doing it for the first time in his life. He did everything as though he were doing some church rite. Rite means ceremony. So B. Wordsworth enjoyed his time. He used to love everything around him, and he did everything as if he was doing it for the first time, or as if he was performing some religious ceremony with a lot of piousness in it. He would say to me, "Now, how about having some ice cream?" And when I said yes, he would grow very serious and say, "Now, which cafe should we patronize?" As though it were a very important thing. He would think for some time about it and finally say, "I think I will go and negotiate the purchase with that shop." Patronize means oblige, or you can say buy from. Negotiate means strike a bargain. So they spent a lot of time together. Wordsworth suggested that they should have some ice cream, and then very seriously he would say, "From which parlor should we buy it?" And then he would say that they would strike a bargain with that particular shop. It means they used to spend a lot of time together and they loved it. The world became a most exciting place. So the narrator also loved the company of B. Wordsworth. This brings us to the end of today's lesson. For your homework, children, solve question 1A on your Echoes workbook. How is the issue of identity reflected in the short story B. Wordsworth? Thank you.